I'm Wanda Thomas Bernard, independent senator representing Nova Scotia. I'm pleased to be participating in this documentary, Standing Tall. When we were growing up in East Preston, we were looked down upon. People in the country were seen as less than those who lived in the city, even in our own communities. There was a lot of class distinctions and class discrimination. And that's very unfortunate, but that's the reality. I mean, we grew up in a time and place where we didn't have much of anything. People lived as best they could off the land. We were very poor. With our boys, they're learning, to appreciate the water, kayaking and fishing and just enjoying the water. It's one of God's gifts to us, and we get to take advantage of it. And then down here on the dock, it's not just for fishing and boating. They do yoga and everything down here. It's really quite amazing. Take advantage of all of this. My youngest sibling was only 18 months old, and there were 12, 13 of us. So that's a lot of people to feed, a lot of poverty to struggle through, but we did. And we survived because we had people in this community who looked out for us. And now when I see, our grandsons here enjoying the land, enjoying the property, learning about the land, I know that we have a brilliant future ahead of us. I can't wait to see, what they grow up and do with it. One of our trails we call the Richard Preston Marsh. And we've done that deliberately because we want to bring all of that history here. And each of the trails have a name because we want to bring that history alive for our grandsons and for the community. We're open to people talking to us about it. These were built by the Acadian Empowerment Academy. That work with the Acadian Empowerment Academy, which I'm the president of, built on the work from that project from the ground up. So it's a project that we have here in the township, but we're really open to province-wide, where we're creating pathways to trades for African Nova Scotians. So people can pause and sit, and it's a wonderful place to have breakfast in the morning. This trail is called Marguerite Way, and we named this trail after Mom and thanking her for her many contributions. The whole trail system we call the Slaughter Heritage Trail. Slaughter was my grandfather, my mother's father, and it was his family that were granted this property. It's one of the Black Loyalist land grants. Over there we have the Thomas thinking space. We have another one of the benches there. Thomas was my family name. And over on the other side we have the Rokers. That's my daughter's married name, and my son-in-law and my grandsons, and I wanted them to really feel a connection to the land, so we've created a fire pit that we named after them. My sister, the late Valerie Thomas Hodges, and our cousin, Connie Glasgow White, and we were the first 3 people from this community to actually attend university and graduate with our first degrees. Valerie went into nursing, Connie went into education, and I ended up going into social work. We went to Mount St. Vincent University, and that was an incredible experience for us to go to the Mount. And then from the Mount, when I graduated with my BA, I knew that I needed more. And I applied to do my master's in social work at Dalhousie. At that time, it was called the Maritime School of Social Work. And I was drawn to social work because of the ways in which people helped us after our father was killed. He was killed in a car accident. And the way people stepped in to help, the way systems were able to be open to us. I wanted to give back, and a career choice of social work helped me to do that. And so being hired by Dalhousie to then return to teach there was a phenomenal gift. My research explored how Black men in Halifax, Nova Scotia and Sheffield, England survive in societies where they're expected to fail. I was a member of the Victoria Road Church for a number of years. And quite honestly, being involved with the church was one of the ways in which I was able to bridge the academy and the community and my spirituality. And I was always working in the church, established really good relationships with each of the pastors in the church to bring programs to the church that would benefit the community. One of the programs that we had a number of years ago was a program called From the Ground Up. And From the Ground Up was a project aimed at creating employability and opportunities for employment for African Nova Scotian women in the north end of Dartmouth. And we did that project in Dartmouth because we knew that a lot of the programs that were going on were happening in Halifax. We hired Kesa Monroe Anderson to be the project coordinator for us. And she did an outstanding job. She was really quite amazing. She was so good at connecting with the women. And as a person who was new to Canada, who'd come as a student, who married the Reverend Leonard Anderson, she was very keen to have employment in her own right, in her own name, and she struggled to find employment.
Senator Bernard was my supervisor for that role. And so she showed me the ropes. It was through Senator Bernard, actually, that I learned about the Black Report in education. And part of my role was to write proposals, to apply for funding, to gain more funding for this program.
I was so pleased to have her. She was so deeply, deeply committed to the work, and she did a really good job for us.
She would be there to tell me, did you read this? Did you read that? Do you know about this? And I really appreciated the leadership that she offered, the mentorship she offered at that time.
Mentorship is important. For me, it's about showing people pathways for their own success, but really seeing success not as individual success, but as success that you can bring back to our communities. Those of us who are entering these fields for the first time from our communities, there is no roadmap. So as a mentor, part of what I've had to do over the years is just to help people to demystify, breaking barriers, removing barriers, and creating opportunities and creating space. That's what I think mentorship is, and also sponsorship. When someone speaks about you when you're not in the room, speaks about the value that you bring, speaks about the contributions that you can make. When someone is able to do that and create opportunities, push those doors open a little bit so that more of us can enter them, I think is absolutely necessary.
She's had people, and I like from her story that she appreciates the people who encouraged her and also those who, she would say, sponsored her along the way. Yes, people need mentors, but we also need sponsors, Black people particularly.
I was invited by Maxine Prevost-Shepherd to form an association of Black social workers here in Nova Scotia. And we formed that organization, 4 of us. We were joined by Althea Tolliver and Frances Mills Clements in 1979, so just 2 years after I got my master's degree. We formed this organization, the Association of Black Social Workers, 4 of us, 4 women. I would go to those policy meetings, those leadership meetings, and I would say, you know, I'm not here as an individual. I'm here representing the entire Association of Black Social Workers. I just never told them there were only 4 of us.
It's inspiring to understand that Senator Bernard started with humble beginnings as well. Senator Bernard actually schooled in a segregated school. Senator Bernard experienced anti-Black racism in school. She experienced it in the workplace. She experienced it even in leadership.
And I realized that we had power. I realized that we could change policies. I realized that we could have an influence over systems and how systems operate. And that association is now, in the next year, we'll be celebrating 45 years. And they're still fighting for change. And I'm proud of the fact that I helped to lead that work, that I was one of the founding members. And we now have an Association of Black Social Workers in Alberta, and we have an Association of Black Social Workers in Saskatchewan, and we have an Association of Black Social Workers in Hamilton, Ontario, and a group that's beginning to form in Ottawa, Ontario. So it's exciting. I feel like I have all these babies. In 2015, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was elected, one of the first things that he talked about, and even when he became leader of the Liberal Party, he wanted to make changes to the Senate. He talked about creating an independent Senate. Prior to that, senators were appointed based on whatever party was in power. And in the history of this country, it's either been the Conservatives or Liberal. So you typically had to be or were considered a member of one of those parties. And you had to be tapped by one of those. Justin Trudeau came into power. He decided he was going to set up an application process, a process where people's files would be adjudicated. And it was my husband. He's a CBC junkie. Everything CBC. And every time he heard Prime Minister Trudeau being interviewed, he'd say, Wanda, I'm telling you, you should apply because he's talking about people like you. He's saying he wants people like you in the Senate. And I'm saying, yeah, you know. Anyway, I decided, you know what? I didn't believe it was going to happen, but I thought, let me apply to see what happens. And at different points during the next few months, I was getting calls from the Privy Council office looking for more information, and I'd send them what they were looking for, and they'd say, okay, you know, you go on to the next stage of the process. I didn't know how many stages there were, so I had no idea. I felt like I was walking around blindfolded in the dark. And then on October 16th, I got a phone call from the Privy Council office saying that I did not meet one of the qualifications, because on paper, it looked like this property, we didn't have $4,000 worth of property. And that's one of the constitutional requirements. You have to own $4,000 worth of property. And on paper, because the property values are so low in East Preston, it looked like the mortgage was way higher than the value of the house. So I say to this person, you know, what bank is going to give you a mortgage for a house that isn't worth it? You know, like, banks don't do that. So I contacted the bank and they said, you know, we're sorry, we can't give you that information because that's private information, but it's our information. Like, who's paying the mortgage? Us or the bank? And I got this song and dance, and I said, look, I want a copy of my mortgage statement by 3 o'clock today. Otherwise, I'm going to a new bank. And I got the statement, and I sent the statement to the Privy Council office that showed we had more than $4,000 worth of property. And I get a call back thanking me and asking me if I would be available between 6 and 7 that evening. And I said, yes. And would you be able to talk privately? And I said, yes. It was just George and I here. At about 5 minutes after 6 that evening, the phone rings. And it's Justin Trudeau calling me. Hello, Wanda, it's Justin Trudeau calling. And I'm in a state of shock. I put the phone on speaker so George can hear. We were having dinner. I put the phone on speaker and I say, Prime Minister Trudeau? Is that really you? He says, I'm calling because I want to call you to the Senate. I have reviewed your body of work, and I believe that you and people like you are what we want and what we need in the Senate. And this is what George was telling me for 6 months. You're the type of person he's talking about. And he said, are you willing to serve? And I said, yes, I am willing and ready to serve. So I almost didn't make it. If I hadn't been willing to advocate for myself and to push to get a statement of a mortgage that I was paying for, I wouldn't be here. A number of years later, I re-met Kesa when I was a team leader for another major project. And I would say this is probably one of the most significant projects of my entire career, the Racism, Violence, and Health Study. That project was a project from the standpoint of Black men. We were questioning whether racism was a form of violence, and we were exploring the impact of racism and violence on the health and well-being of Black men and their families in Halifax, Toronto, and Calgary. It was a big, big project. And I began that project. It was funded by the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. I began that project the year after I became director at the Dalhousie School of Social Work. So I was very busy. One of the ways that was really helpful for us in doing that project, engaging community, working with community, was actually having strong community members who were interested in being a part of the study, participating with us. In total, in the 3 Canadian cities, we actually taught to over 3,000 Black Canadians. And one of the significant outcomes of that work was the book, Race and Wellbeing. That book was published in 2010, but I think it's more relevant now than it was when we first published it. Many people across the country have told me it's their Bible when it comes to understanding and unpacking racism and what that means and the impact of racism on our health and our well-being, and also seeing racism as a form of violence and how that violence impacts us. And you know, the Canadian Institutes of Gender and Health now include racism as one of the forms of violence as a result of that project. And one of the other things that's so significant is that Health Canada now recognizes racism as one of the social determinants of health. Those are big impacts, big impacts. But I think that one of the other things about that work was that it inspired a whole generation of young academics coming behind me. You know, many of us who grew up in these Black communities, back in the day, we had a lot of shame about the communities that we came from because there was so much negative stigma attached to our communities and so much racism that we were experiencing. And we were so cut off from the mainstream, you know, not having public transportation and all of those sorts of things. So when I saw that heritage circle and I saw what Kesa had managed to bring together, I was so impressed. And for me, it really was a passing of the torch moment, because I could see what she had done, and then encouraged her to go on and do a PhD, and of course now she has.
She's been encouraging to me. She has supported me in terms of other employment, you know, in terms of serving as a reference. She has supported me in applications, you know, for other opportunities in education. She also talks about failure. And she's not afraid to talk about where maybe she at the time didn't recognize opportunities that she had, but that people gave her another chance. And she took that second chance.
Failure happens, but failure doesn't have to define you. Failure does not have to define you. You can pick yourself up again. And I would say that some of my best growth and development has come from the mistakes I've made, from the failures that I've experienced. Being able to get up again and get moving and keep going and keep doing. That builds strength. It builds character. And that's the kind of message I want to pass on through mentorship opportunities that I have.
She achieved heights in academia when other Black people, and particularly African Nova Scotian, historic African Nova Scotians born and raised in Nova Scotia, were not welcome, were not included, were not valued in academia.
I bring Black voices into the Senate. I bring marginalized voices in, and that's so powerful to me to be able to do that. Senators legislate, so we review all legislation that's coming forward, and I bring a social justice, anti-Black racism lens to all of that work. It's all important. I would say that one of the best contributions lately was contributing to the Disability Benefits Act that was just passed, and it was my great honor to bring the Black Canadian Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities into that space, and having them come as a witness. And they were the only Black people in the country speaking about Black people with disabilities, and they participated in that, in the our study of that bill in the Senate. That was a moment for me where I was just so proud to be able to do that. I'm grateful to my family, I'm grateful to my community, grateful to the churches that I've been a part of. I'm grateful to be in the position that I'm in, not to speak for, but to bring the voices in that otherwise might not be heard. I consider that a great honor and a privilege to be able to do that. And it helps me every day to stand tall, even when things are very challenging.